Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box. Heidi, thank you for being here today. As we were kind of joking about a moment ago, I was in the hot seat on the Flute360 podcast a few months back, and so it's your turn, and I've really been looking forward to today. I know you have so many incredible things that you're working on, but I want to jump way back to the beginning before we get into all of that cool stuff. Tell me about when you first picked up a flute and how you came into music, and at what age that was.
Oh my goodness. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me here. And you're right. You were in the hot seat for Flute360 about a year ago. I'd have to look at your episode number, but can we switch? Because I loved asking you questions. You were such an eloquent speaker. But yeah, so the flute actually kind of found me. So I was fortunate to be raised in a family that really supported the arts. And so one of the rules at home was that everybody learned the piano. And so myself, my brother, and my sister, piano was mandatory in a very loving way. So my mom is and was a pianist and an organist. My dad was a percussionist. By no means professional. They didn't do gigs or anything, but they knew their instruments. And so rightfully so, the three kids take piano. And here we are. And so during my piano studies, I also was a ballerina for 13 years. And that was the direction of my career for quite some time. I had an injury and then things pivoted and I found the flute. And I really found a great instrument to be able to then now express and put my expressivity through an instrument rather than, not necessarily like ballet and the arts in that way. And so it was a really great outlet for me. And from there, I took lessons, the normal trajectory with what a lot of musicians do. I played in church, 2 services religiously every week. I learned a lot from those women who really nurtured me, the pianist, the singers, the director there. And then basically I went to band camps in the summer, and these wonderful mentors were all around me. And I realized, I want to be like them. I want to emulate them. I want to be the educator that they are for me, for my future students. And so I decided at a young age, I want to be Dr. Heidi. And so I took music studies really seriously, got the 3 degrees, and here we are.
Just like that. The 3 degrees, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal.
A couple few years in school. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's cool to hear that your family was so musical. Did you guys play together a lot when you were growing up?
That's a good question. I think it would have to be a different family dynamic. And we, no, we did not play together, but it was interesting to, practice piano. I have fond memories of like my mom hearing me practice in the background and then coming over and saying, hey, let me help you with that. So that's really cool. But no, we didn't play together.
Very different than my childhood memories.
Okay.
Not in a bad way, but my parents were just not musical. So it was more like sit down and play, and they could not help. So it's fun to have that support system at home, and it's fun to have that relationship ongoing. I'm sure your parents, as you were going through your degrees and everything, were also just thrilled to see you blossoming in that way. I want to back up though from the transition, from ballet into music, because I joke a lot, but it's actually very serious that networking with other arts-related business is important, because students that are already in the arts, they like the arts. Like, of course, they're going to also look at picking up an instrument or, being involved in other ways if they're already dancing or taking art classes. So did you feel like your piano background, since that preceded ballet, did that help with your dancing as you got started, and then vice versa as you got serious about flute?
Oh, it's all connected for sure. The piano and the ballet kind of happened at the same time. So I started ballet at 2 and I started piano at 5. So I was taking piano lessons and ballet lessons around the same time, actually. And yeah, it was really interesting because when there was a dance act or we were getting ready for a specific show and we were rehearsing, the music that we're dancing to is usually classically based. And so I remember even as a little girl going, ooh, I know that piece. And so that was really fun. And then one of the last flute solos that I was playing around that time when my ballet career ended was a piece by Begay. And I remember hearing this very famous flute solo coming through the speakers, while I was dancing. And again, same thing. I'm like, I know that piece. And so it's good to introduce children to the arts in some fashion because they do connect the dots. Children are very smart, very bright. And I definitely think that helped my growth as an artist for sure, just because of all of those reasons, being exposed to ballet and knowing how the body works, of course, is going to help my music playing. Now, you're not holding the body in the same way, but what you learn about your body in one aspect can really help you thrive being a musical performer in another way. And so, yeah, I think it's all connected for sure.
Absolutely. Well, and even the expression, I know in my own lessons when I'm teaching students, we use movement to shape phrases and to help articulate what that might look like or feel like to help demonstrate that. And I might move away and have my students kind of copy me and then put that into the clarinet. And it's something that I think is best achieved by my students who have a dance background because they get it. They understand how that's all interconnected. So it's cool to see that connection. Now, your education journey, when you transitioned from high school into college, how did you choose where you wanted to end up? What were you looking for in an undergraduate degree program?
Oh my goodness. My undergraduate degree program is like none other. I went to 3 different universities in 4 years.
I didn't know that. Oh my goodness. That's a lot of transition.
Yeah. I would not recommend it. It was not, it was not my plan, but life is ironic. And so I learned a lot though, actually, because now fast forward 20 years, it's really funny. A lot of musicians who are transfer students will come to me for advice. So it's like, I know what to do. I've been in your shoes. So I decided to attend Eastern Illinois University originally because of the flute professor there. His name is and was Dr. Brian Luce, and he was one of the flute professors whom I met through one of those summer programs. And the way he played and the way he taught, I really resonated with him and his personality and his style. And so I followed him to EIU. And then at the end of that year, he announced, hey, I got the job at the University of Arizona in Tucson. I'm going to be leaving. And I said, okay, I'll follow you. And he goes, no, we don't have enough space, maybe later. And I said, okay. And I put a pin in it thinking, oh, maybe for my master's degree or maybe, for a performance certificate. And so then I transferred to Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches because another flute professor whom I really admired back in the day was Dr. Diane Boyd Schultz. And so I followed her to SFA. At the end of that year, she announced, I'm going to Alabama. So the running joke was like, these flute professors are leaving because Heidi keeps coming in.
Heidi's running him out of town.
I know. That says something about me. Oh no. So she gets this tenure track flute professor job at the University of Alabama. And so at the end of sophomore year, I just decided, well, I'm just going to stay put. Because the flute professor who's coming in was going to be Dr. Christina Gunther. I had heard amazing things about her. But then Brian Luce calls me 2 weeks before school starts at the University of Arizona. And he goes, I have a spot. I have a scholarship for you. It was a hefty scholarship. Come. And I said, all right, let me pray about this. And he's like, well, you've got 2 days to decide. I'm like, great. And so I decided it was a great opportunity. I went and I finished my BA in music my senior year. So I was actually able to transfer a lot of those credits over to U of A, which was a huge blessing because as you know, like states and their rules and curriculums, it can get messy. But I was able to finish in 4 years from 2003 to 2007. And it all worked out because that's where I met my husband. So there you go. We're college sweethearts.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, in that transition, I mean, especially when you're looking at making a change in 2 days like that, you have to find a place to live. You have to pack up all, like that is a wild, stressful experience. How did you manage that? And also, of course, you're like trying to practice and prepare for the start of the semester and all of that on top of it. What does that look like?
Oh my goodness. Good question. I just sought out advice. And so my mom really, I give her a lot of credit because to be very honest, this isn't going to be everyone's favorite answer, but this is my story. We just went to the elders of the church and we just said, hey, we need prayer. I need help. And we had a lot of deacons and pastors pray over me. And I just had to wait for God's timing and his voice to really be able to discern, like, is this where he wants me to be? And that's the God honest truth. Like, that's how I make a lot of decisions in my life, is that. And it's faith-based because I don't know how to, for me personally, I don't know how to navigate this crazy world without some sort of spiritual direction. So that's my North Star. And that's how I was able to navigate it. That's what made it less stressful. That's what made it so super clear what I needed to do. And, somebody who has a faith-based religion or not, or whatever, the one nugget that you can pull from this is really ask questions from people who care about you, who want the best for you, because you can't do it alone. And especially people who are elders who have walked many years in front of you and have more experience. Because when you are, how old was I? I would have been like 19. You think as a 19-year-old
decision at 19.
Yeah, you think at 19 you know everything, but you don't. And even at 37, I don't know everything, and I still seek out advice. So yeah, and finding an apartment in such a quick amount of time, that was interesting.
That's the first thing I thought of as you were saying this. Was like, where are you going to live? Oh my gosh, Heidi, where are you going to live? And this is like, years and years ago, and I'm panicking for you. Yeah. That's a big transition. Yeah. And I agree with what you're saying. Having a mentor is something that feels so second nature to a lot of musicians. We always have a teacher. We always have someone that we're studying under or learning from. And even if we are independent in our professional career, there's still people we're calling and asking things of, and looking for advice from, or playing our audition repertoire from, and looking for feedback. So it's so normal for us. But then outside of the actual music and playing, we tend to not have that very often, like career advice and career counseling, or talking about transitioning or finding a school. We get a little more insular, I think. It's like ourselves and maybe our very, very close circle that we go to. We don't really define mentors very often. But it is helpful always to have someone that's in your corner that can, without all of the emotion that you might have around a situation, help you see clearly.
Oh, yeah. Beautifully said, for sure. And I really hadn't thought of it like that before, but I can definitely see how us musicians typically would kind of go down that path of saying, yes, we have a flute professor, a flute mentor, but outside of that, it may not come as natural for us to seek that out. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, as you finally finished the 4 years of chaos in the undergrad, transitioning to your master's program, at that point, what did you think your career was going to look like? What was the trajectory that you had in your mind?
It was definitely education. So as I was deciding between the different master's programs, I was applying to UCLA, a school in Kansas, Louisiana, Chicago, things like that. And again, I felt a real strong pulling, again, going back to that 13-year-old Heidi's dream. I want to be Dr. Heidi. And most of us know one of the main reasons why you get your doctorate is to teach at the academic level in higher ed, right? And so again, it just brought it full circle again, like education was kind of whispered on my heart. And I was like, okay, that makes sense with the whole trajectory of everything. So I decided to go to NSULA in Louisiana because the flute professor there, again, just had a really heavy, strong background for her own career in teaching. And I really wanted to be under her wing and have her mentor me. And a lot of it too, to help with that education trajectory, there was going to be a teaching assistantship that I was one. And so I thought, great, if I can teach undergraduate flute majors, that's going to be a really great start towards my career and my career goals.
Absolutely. Were you teaching privately at all when you were in school at this point, or was it just the assistantship?
Good question. So during my college years, I was not teaching, merely a student, and maybe it was for a good thing just because I was moving around so much. It probably wouldn't have been as feasible. But yes, during my master's, that's when I started teaching full time.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then going to doctorate, obviously that was the plan still, because that's where we looked at the doctorate program. And where did you do your doctorate?
Texas Tech University. But I will say that there was a 6-year gap between the master's and the doctorate.
Ah, okay.
And since we're talking with students and giving them value and resources to help them with their career, right, and make career decisions, I will say at some point, one of the nuggets that I would love to offer you today as the listener is if you can find a gap year or a couple gap years between degrees, I would highly recommend it. Now, you don't have to take 6 years off, but I think a gap year between either your BM or MM or your MM or your DMA or whatever is so invaluable. If you are, and everyone's path is different, so I'm not dissing anyone or anything like that. But I think if you go through those 3 degrees nonstop, then you're just a full-time student. And so when you come out and you're trying to apply for these jobs, if you are going down this traditional path, employers could see you as just a full-time student and you don't really have that experience, even though you might have a TA, even though you might have worked part-time. So there's one gem that I can offer. Try to find a gap year if possible. And the other reason, not just because for the sake of the employer getting really excited about your CV, but for you. It is so important, I think, to have a gap year somewhere in there, because then when you go back to school for that other degree, you are going to be a better student. Oh my goodness, the way I was a student from BA to MM, it felt like a continuation where it felt like the next 2 years of my master's, I was like senior year 2, senior year 3. Does that make sense?
Yep,
but
absolutely.
Then from master's to DMA, I approached the DMA. I took it more seriously. I was really invested in the classes. Not that I wasn't earlier on, but I was expecting, like, I needed answers. I was really gung-ho about getting this information and pulling it out from teachers. I was a sponge. My friends know that I'm a talker, but I was like asking even more questions, which might be baffling to some people. But I was a sponge and I wanted the most out of that program. And I think it was because throughout those 6 years, I was teaching 50 to 60 flute students in the DFW area. And I was learning what I didn't know. I was learning my gaps. I was learning the information that I hadn't acquired yet in those first 2 degrees. And so that's why I just wanted to be at that sponge and ask tons of questions, because I knew that, not that my career depended on it, but I wanted the best for my students. I wanted to be the best flute teacher for them. And so I took the degree that much more seriously.
It's interesting too, because I think a lot of academia, I don't even want to say sets an expectation, because I don't think that's really the case, but I think it breeds this culture of just pushing through and doing it all in one, because I think a lot of teachers have this opinion that if you leave, you won't come back. And that's treated as a negative thing. And I don't actually think it's that negative. Like, if you leave after an MM and you're ready and you've got the career path and you're happy where you are and you don't want to go back for a DMA, that's not a bad thing. If you found your groove, like, stick with it. That's great. You don't have to just get that DMA just to get it. And this was something I actually struggled with when I was finishing up my master's program, and I felt a lot of guilt about not continuing on to my DMA right away. Like, it's only 3 years and then I have a doctorate. Like, it's not even that much time. Like, I should just push through. But realistically, by the time I finished my master's, I wasn't happy in academia anymore. I needed a break. It was time. Like, it was better for my mental health to have a break. It was better for my well-being and my career to have that break. But it's hard to discern that. And to take that gap is a little scary. So when you were trying to figure this out, coming back to the mentorship piece again, when you were looking at the end of your master's program and trying to figure out what comes next, obviously you knew you wanted to teach long term, but who was helping you make the decision, or where were you kind of discerning for yourself? Do I want to continue through or do I want this gap?
That's a great question. And you ask amazing questions. So you being a podcast host.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah. No, I love it. For me, I guess I didn't have to actually think like, oh, do I take a gap year or do I go straight to my doctorate? Because this amazing opportunity was presented to me on a silver platter and I just grabbed it. So what ended up happening was at the end of my master's, it was my first year married to Eric. And so at the end of 2009, when I graduated, right on the cusp, like probably 2 months before graduation, this wonderful lady, Clara Loy, comes to a flute festival in Louisiana. She hears me play. She's asking me questions. And at the end of this 2-day flute festival, she looks at me and goes, I'm 70% positive I'm going to be moving to St. Louis, Missouri. I have a studio in Texas that I'm going to be leaving behind. Would you like these 40 flutists? I was like, oh,
yes.
Okay, yes, please.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
It's money. It pays. And I get it. I don't have to do all the marketing. Sold.
Yeah, sold. Done. Like, amazing. I don't have to think twice about this.
Oh, that's
and so
funny.
this is a funny story. So I remember coming home from that evening concert. You know how usually at the end of a festival, they have a gala and whatnot. So I come home, I run upstairs, and my husband's getting ready to work the graveyard shift through the grocery store, Brookshire's in Natchitoches, Louisiana. And I'm screaming at him, we're moving to Texas. And he goes, okay, how sure? Because he knows I'm so impulsive. I am such an impulsive person. And I told him everything. He's like, yeah, that's like 70%. That's not, 100.
Yeah, we're not moving tomorrow.
We're not moving, yeah. And so I was like, nope, we're doing this. This is exactly what we're doing. I know she's on the fence, but I just had a gut reaction. And that's another thing that I would love to share with the listeners is listen to your gut, not to sound cheesy, but really honestly, like, looking at the anatomy of the body, they say your stomach is your second brain. There's a lot of I don't know if it's neurons or what it is. I'm not going to embarrass myself, but it is your second brain. Listen to your gut. So my gut was just like, no, like, even though she said 70%, we're going. This is it. This has to be it. And sure enough, we moved and we got settled in about June, July of 2009, about a month before school would start in August. And I still hadn't heard from Clara. And so I thought, and I followed up, still nothing. And I thought, okay, I made a bad decision. But it's okay.
I might be in Texas with no students.
Yeah. And then she called me back and she goes, yes, I'm moving. Here's the list. And so again, I had about 2-3 weeks to get the schedule up, to meet the parents, meet the students, meet the band directors. And that's why I was there for 6 years, because she graciously, I'm still indebted to her, graciously just handed over a list of 40 flute students. And then I was able to then recruit like 10, 20 more throughout that span. But that is unheard of, especially because the Texas school districts, they have such a thriving program. They're very selective of who they bring in. And she just welcomed me with open arms and just said, here are my flute colleagues. Here's Tara. Here's Christine. Here's Anne. Oh, by the way, here's my position through the nonprofit organization in the area, the Texas Flute Society. I mean, I was just blessed, Kelly, beyond measure. And because of that, when I left for Texas Tech in 2015, the least I could do was return the favor. And I did the exact same thing for a young gentleman. And that brought me a lot of gratification and satisfaction to go, oh, I was able to return back what she had given me, which felt really good.
Two things that I'm picking up from listening to you that I want to just reiterate for anyone that's listening to this right now. First and foremost, listening to your gut is such an important thing. If it doesn't resonate 100%, even if it feels the slightest bit off, keep reiterating until you find the right solution. If it's not perfect, you will find the right fit for you. And so that feeling of complete peace, of, even if it's a scary new thing that you're doing, like moving several states over and reestablishing yourself, if you find that peace inside, then it's the right move for you. And you have to listen to that. If something's not exactly the right match, listen to that too. That's first and foremost. But second, of course, it was this amazing blessing, but also you did your due diligence. Like you followed up, you did that networking, you created that connection, and then you stayed in contact and said, I'm still interested, even when they weren't responding. And the reason I'm hitting on this so much is because I think this is where a lot of us tend to fall short in networking, is we meet someone or we are presented with an opportunity, and then we send one email or one text and we're like, oh, they didn't answer. They must not be interested anymore. And that's just not reality. People get busy. There's so many other things going on. And I know the way that I treat especially my personal email inbox, like it's a to-do list and things get lost in there. And I appreciate when people follow up because it brings it back to the top of that to-do list. It makes it more of a priority. You did that and you got that opportunity because you worked for it and you did the follow-up and you stayed on top of it. So hitting on that, because I think it's such an important skill to learn, networking, and then also following up on those connections is really important.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I could not have said that any better. And good for you to recognize that and to offer that to your tribe and to your community to really emphasize that. Because when I work with my clients, I hear the same exact thing. Who am I to knock on the door? I don't want to bother them. I don't want to do a follow-up email 2 weeks later. I don't want to call them. I'm going to be a pest. No, and no. The worst that can happen is that they say no. But that's not even a bad thing still, because like sometimes those no's for that particular season will turn into a maybe or a yes in another season. And I have seen this now in my current business constantly. Like I will reach out for a possible partnership with a flute company or a flute maker. I'll hear nothing. It'll be complete crickets. I'll follow up 6 months later. I'll follow up a year later. And then next thing you know, we have this amazing partnership because now it's the right time. Now we can come together and all of the elements are there. So the thing that I just want to like reemphasize that Kelly said so beautifully was, you are not a pest. Do your due diligence and follow up, because nobody's going to do it for you. To be very loving and to be very frank, you're the only one who's in the driver's seat to make that possible for you, to open up that door. And you're not going to be seen as annoying at all. If anything, the other person on the other side, like what you said, it might be a breath of fresh air. It might be like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that their email hit the top of my inbox again. Yes. I totally forgot. I got busy. I mean, there are so many variables on the other person's end. You have no idea what's going on in their world. They really could have truly forgotten. So anyways, I don't want to keep going down this rabbit hole, but networking, when we say this, we're networking, I know Kelly's heart, and a lot of it has to do with me really deciphering and making it super clear for the audience. Like, it's building relationships in a very genuine and authentic way. Because a lot of times people hear that word networking and they get like, ooh, they feel like it's sleazy. But if you genuinely reach out with this heart of servitude and you really want to find the win-win for everybody involved, it's not sleazy. You're being a servant and you're serving your possible future partner, your audiences, and there's that win-win-win. And actually that's something that, and you don't know that, well, you probably do know this, Kelly, but this is one of my like huge soapboxes. So unfortunately for you, you just got me on that soapbox.
I'm thrilled. I'm glad. Okay. We've shared this. So
perfect.
I'm thrilled.
Okay. You're like, oh no, I got her on this platform. I can't get her off. But this is one element I talk a lot about through my Flute360 podcast. And so much so that I literally have memorized the episode numbers that I talk about this very thing, because I'm always mentioning it. So it's episodes 173, 174, and 175 through Flute360. Nice. And it's about initiation, cultivation, and scaling. So it's something that I really am proud of that content, because Flute360ers come to me all the time saying, I want to build new opportunities. And I'm like, yep, your network is your net worth. You have got to get it. You got to get your name out there. You've got to build and pull people into your orbit. We can't do it alone. And so I'll get off my soapbox by saying network, network, network. Put yourself out there and find that win-win for everybody.
Well, and like you said, it's not networking with the intention of getting something out of it. And I think we have to be really clear about that. When I'm thinking networking, I'm not thinking like, hounding someone for an opportunity that they never even wanted to give you, or it's nothing like that. It's building these genuine connections and relationships, and these have to be mutually beneficial. Like Heidi, as we're talking about this transition for you and entering into this incredible opportunity where you've got 40 students served up for you, like, yes, that's an opportunity for you, but also that teacher did not have to place them with 25 different teachers and didn't have to do that work. Like, you saved her that effort and that energy. At the same time, she knew her students were going to a place that she was really confident in. And that's, especially as an educator, we care so much about our students. You don't want to see them end up with the wrong fit. You want to make sure that they're with the right teacher that's going to carry on that legacy for you. And all of this is connected in this very symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship that we want to make sure these connections we're making are genuine, are real, are friendships first. And then all the business stuff comes later. But long story short, people can't help you if they don't know what you're up to. So you have to talk about it. You have to have these relationships in the industry, or you're never going to get these opportunities that other people paint as like being magically handed to them. In reality, like Heidi fostered a relationship. You built this incredible partnership and you worked for it. So we'll get off that soapbox together, I guess. But it is a really, really important thing. And I think it's missing for so many young musicians. It's not taught in school, and you have to practice it just like any other skill. So
I was going to say it's missing because it's not taught in school. It's not. They teach us how to play the clarinet and the flute really well. And score study,
and bye,
and musicology, and good luck. But it really is pulling the right people in your orbit and outside of music too, to like wrap this up. Yes, Clara was another flute teacher and flutist, right? But the more I'm getting into my business, I'm realizing you need to pull the tech guys in. You need to pull the graphic designers in. You need to you have to venture out into these different fields, because when you're promoting that remote course, you're going to maybe need to hire a marketer if you want to. You need a tech guy to help you with website design, things like that. So just even thinking one step further, bigger picture, any student listening to this, go outside of the flute studio, the clarinet studio, into brass maybe, and then venture out into the arts, tech, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. When schools have opportunities to go and meet people, just like any general networking, go to those opportunities, go to the career fairs. Even if you're never going to work in tech, just go and meet people. It's great to have those connections and socialize. And honestly, having friends outside of music, as someone who is married to a non-musician, not the worst thing. It's kind of nice, actually.
That is a good point.
Because Isaac always thinks everything I play sounds beautiful. And, honestly, that's a pretty nice thing to come close to. Okay, so we talked about Flute360 a little bit, and I want to talk about the evolution of that, because this happened during your doctoral program, and albeit quite a bit ahead of the podcast time, which is so cool. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about how that all came to be.
Sure. So now in this journey, this timeline that Kelly brought us down, I just finished teaching 50, 60 students. I'm going into the DMA program. The first 2 years, it's just classes and practicing and performances. Then the third year, the committee comes to you and starts saying, okay, what's your topic? So I presented everything I thought to make them happy, like any topic, like research topic that really I was passionate about, and I thought I would get the okay from them. Standard things, performance guides, studying Native American flute music, things that, I knew would be deemed acceptable in academia. Kid you not, Lisa Garner-Santa, my mentor and flute professor, looked at me and said, no, you're starting a flute podcast. And the reason, and your eyes got big. The reason why I say that is because, one, it was such an avant-garde, new idea to do something creative, different. There was only one really flute podcast out at the time. And for them to give me their blessing and say, yeah, let's do something new, big, creative.
Yeah. And put the resources behind that too. I mean, that's big.
Yeah. I was just blown away. Like, really? You're going to let me do that? That's so cool. And so if anyone's listening to that and they're thinking, well, why did Lisa just go start a podcast? Because it seems so like left field, like where did that come from? So I think, she's really good at knowing her students' strengths, and she does a really good job of piecing together ingredients to put together like this really beautiful stew. And she knows that, again, I've said this before, but I will say it again. Anyone who knows me knows that I like to talk. And it's not talking from the sense of I like to hear my own Chicago nasally voice. It's really from the sense of sharing. I love sharing information. I love how things connect. And that's the educator in me. I love helping people move the needle forward in their careers and their playing. So she knew I had that aspect of just, I love to learn and I love to communicate these ideas. Then she knew that I had also such an invaluable resource with my husband. The other side of it, he's an audio video editor. So as now that you're a new podcaster, Kelly, but you've been a content creator for a long time, half the battle is the tech side of things. Like I can talk all day long. I can research all day long. I can do interviews all day long, but then you have the element of putting it together, editing, video. So that's the other half of it. And she knew I had that to my disposal, and not many people are fortunate to have an expert whom you're living with who could literally bring the project to life. So not to
the other
cheesy.
Benefit of marrying a non-musician,
right? I mean,
working in music, but absolutely another non-performer.
Exactly. And so that it was like this perfect puzzle and all these pieces coming together. And so, the third ingredient or the third piece that I think that was kind of going on in the back of her mind too was not just the sharing, the education, not just the tech, but then like all of my friends throughout the 3 years, they kept saying, she should start a flute podcast, and a lot of it had to do with like, again, there was, I think people even recognized it back then that it was an untapped market. Podcasting is an untapped market for musicians. Not a lot of musicians are tapping into this. And I think later, maybe we can talk about this, but there was the Flute View magazine podcast out there around the time, and maybe one other. But throughout the 2 years from 2015 to 2017, people were even saying in flute master classes and lessons and things like that, she should start a podcast. And so I think all of those different things, that's why Lisa came to the conclusion, like, no, you're not doing this, research over here, you're doing this. So the nugget in all of that too is have a goal, have a focus on something and plan and make the necessary steps. Like I did research and I put together proposals and things like that, but be open and flexible and willing to hear what people are saying in your orbit. The people, again, who love you, support you, see things about you that you may not necessarily see, because those opportunities are around us sometimes. And if we're willing to notice those breadcrumbs, oh my goodness, Kelly, the magic can be there. And look at where I am 5 years later with this thing. I never thought in a million years that this Flute360 podcast that was going to be my dissertation, a beautiful means to an end, ended up becoming like this resume builder to help me along that academic path to try to get that traditional job. Then it pivoted to it being a marketing arm, shining a light onto my business and how I serve my clients. Never in a million years did I think that I would be where I am now with Flute360. So the nugget in all of that for the listeners is, keep your eyes and ears open, be willing, be flexible, because there's magic all around you, and listen to that advice from your mentors, because you could strike gold, and so that's what I would want to offer.
It's good to do these non-traditional things. Like the traditional career path, I think for a lot of musicians is like, okay, finish my master's, maybe my doctorate. I go start taking auditions. I start teaching a little bit on the side. Maybe I work in the music industry, but just not in performing. Like maybe I work for a music store or for a publisher. And at the same time, I'm taking auditions on the side and balancing all of that. That's a very, very typical path. And of course, I would never talk anyone out of that path. If you want to perform and you want to take auditions and that's what in your gut feels like the right call for you, then go for it. Please do.
Yeah.
If there's like 5% of you that's thinking, what else is out there? Like, what else could feel right for me if I just explored? Keeping yourself open to these ideas is really helpful. And we've talked about this a little bit before too, Heidi, but I didn't start a business coaching program for musicians because it was my own idea. Like someone else said, hey, you are already doing this for free. Why don't you just start charging for it? Like you have a business. And I needed a third party to tell me that. And it's a very similar story where like, you just don't know what you're capable of sometimes because it feels so natural and right that thinking about like monetizing it feels weird, or thinking about making it a career move feels weird when it's just this thing that you like to do for fun, or it was just part of this dissertation. It was this one-time project. But as you've mentioned, this has opened a lot of doors for you. So Flute360, which again, for our listeners, Heidi's the host of. It's still this very long-standing podcast. You've got well over 200 episodes now. It is a massive, massive production. Very well-produced podcast too, if I might add, on Eric's end. So it's a beautiful show, and there's a lot of good resources there, not just for flutists. Heidi talks about the whole music industry, which is super cool. But when we've talked about this previously, and when we did our episode about a year ago, I remember chatting afterwards and you said, the podcast gave me other career opportunities. It opened other doors for me for teaching, for example. What have some of those other opportunities been since your doctoral program?
Yeah, great question. So I want to just really make this clear for the listeners, because again, like what you're saying, try different things outside of music, right? A lot of times I think musicians get scared like, oh, that's not a traditional thing for musicians to do, right? But I just want to like reemphasize with this podcast, people then see me as like, oh, well, you're a podcaster. I'm like, yes, but I still wear these traditional hats. Podcasting just opens the door for me to meet the right people for then those opportunities to unfold naturally. So if you're scared when you hear Kelly say, try these different things outside of music, if you're a clarinetist, be a clarinetist. But again, notice those breadcrumbs, notice the strings. What can you piece together in this very like avant-garde way? Maybe it's untraditional in some aspect, but it could help you really amplify your clarinet voice, like artistically or as a teacher. So if you still see yourself as a teacher or as a flutist and you're afraid of like picking up that podcast because you don't want to be seen as a podcaster, just know that it's just one element in my portfolio. And if anything, it amplifies and it strengthens my teaching skills, my performing skills. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I just know how some musicians think.
Yes. And candidly, you're watching the networking right now live, everyone. Like this is networking. Like Heidi and I talking about our careers and sharing these experiences and finding these things to bond over. This is literally it. This is the networking and the friendship building. And that's why like Heidi's in our first few episodes of the podcast was because I had a great time on hers, learned a ton about her and wanted to share that. That is literally the foundation of everything we talked about earlier. So it has opened a lot of doors for you. And I think that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So the doors that it's opened, basically like students have found me, you know, through the podcast. So I have students in California, Finland, Romania.
That's awesome.
I mean, come on. Cool. Isn't that so cool? And one of my students in Finland actually just boasted about, you know, our connection and our relationship and what we've done together so much that like Flute360 was just published in a Finnish magazine.
Oh my gosh.
And I know. And it's just like, again, like it blows my mind because in 2015, when it was officially published, never did I think that Flute360 was going to be mentioned in a magazine in Finland. So that just shows you the dynamic of what owning a piece of digital real estate can do for your career, for your business, having a platform where you can meet those people, where your voice can be amplified, where people can see you. It's like shining a massive floodlight onto you and your strengths and how you can serve your tribe. So teaching engagements, people have hired me for presentations, to be an author of books, which is really cool. I got to write some chapters in a recent publication. summits, festivals, being a performer for like newly commissioned pieces for like female composers and getting their grants. You know, the boxes checked off, like having X amount of females through the performance. What else? Corporate sponsorships. I could talk about that for a whole nother 2 hours. Corporate sponsorships, tech, audio and video opportunities for Eric, because then they know like, oh, the sister company, JK Media, he does her production for her podcast. Oh, can we hire him to do work for choirs and bands and orchestras and put together this virtual concert for our kids, live events. So I could keep going on, but you get the gist of it. Like, it's opening up doors. And the reason why it's so exciting for me and for anyone who wants to start a podcast, that's why I have like, you know, resources talking about like, start a podcast, do this thing, because I'm inviting you into this space because I know what it's done for my career. And especially when you've gone on that traditional path, right? And trying to get that academic job, and doors weren't opening for me. They weren't. They were closing. And I know there's somebody who resonates with this, who is seeing door after door slam in their face. And it's frustrating. It is so painstakingly frustrating. And then to have a platform where it's the opposite, where I'm actually being seen, where I get to use my talents, where I get to help people be a better flutist or educator, or to help them design their remote classes. It is so fulfilling and satisfying to see doors actually open. And you're like, oh my gosh, like that's a breath of fresh air. Because I mean, to have doors closed for like 2 years straight after the doctorate I was in a very dark place. It was not fun. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, because we identify so much. And I think there's people out there who can resonate with this. Like, I'm a flutist, and we take that instrument and we identify with it so much. And we identify with the degree. I'm Dr. Heidi, you know, and I worked 20 years to get this degree, and then see nothing pan out. Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about the rug being pulled out from underneath you. It was not fun, you know, and then to say, oh, I have this podcast running in the background. What if I pivoted? What if I got creative and decided this is my digital baby? I'm going to make it now not a continuation of a dissertation. I'm going to actually open my own doors with this digital platform.
What's cool about this too, when we think about the last 3 years, is so many musicians have had to pivot, and not being a one-dimensional person, not just being your instrument. Even if you are going to go the full-time performance route, even if you're going to go play in the orchestra, you have to have other pieces to you, because in your musical career, you'll be more fulfilled if it's, you know, as an example, if we're not just playing the orchestra rep, but maybe you are working on commissions and new repertoire and getting to work with composers and having some expression that way, where you have a little bit more control, not just playing with the orchestra's programmed, right? Like, that helps you feel more fulfilled and well-rounded. But then outside of that performance career, having your other interests, your other hobbies, the other things that bring you joy in your life is really important. And Kate Warren, who is also going to be on our podcast, French horn player, fantastic content creator, does a lot on TikTok and Instagram, posted recently this week, I think it was on her Instagram stories. It was like a little just text reshare that she did that said, it's called human being, not human doing. And that hit me really hard this week. I think I needed to see that a little bit. But the reason I think it stuck out to me in our conversation today is it's not just following that path. It's not doing what's right. It's not doing what's prescribed. It's not the traditional or the way you're supposed to do things that usually gets you the success. It's standing out from the crowd in some ways is going to get you that orchestra job. Standing out from that crowd in, you know, applying for academic jobs is going to help you stand out and actually get those interviews. Having things that are interesting, different, unique that you're working on, especially in today's world where there's a lot of competition, but also everyone has something cool that they're working on, it seems like, helps you to speak a little bit more truly to who you are and what you want to do in the world and the impact that you want to make. So listening to that is hard, but it's really important. And you've done something really spectacular with the podcast for the last couple of years. And as everyone pivoted online, Heidi was way ahead of the game. She had this one figured out. That's for sure.
Yeah. No,
thank
you. Thank you for that. But to piggyback off of what Kelly just said, what makes you unique? You know, like you want to be one of one. You don't want to be one of 1,000. And that's why I think there's many ingredients to why the music industry has shifted so much. But if we're looking at like the job market and everything like that, the market is overly saturated with so many musicians, and not just a quantity thing, but a quality thing. There are so many highly skilled musicians out there, right? Just in the
which is amazing. Like we can go to great concerts.
It's a good problem to have, but when it comes to like deciding between Joe and Jane, and 1,000 other clarinetists, who are they going to choose? And what makes you stand out, to piggyback off of what Kelly just said? So since I'm a female, you know, look at the female flutists. Okay, let's just say hypothetically, and you can do this on your tablet and stylus, anyone who's listening to this funnel exercise real quick. I'm a female flutist. Okay, now I'm one of 1,000. All right, well, I'm an educator. Okay, maybe that splits it down to 750, right? I'm a female flutist teacher who has her doctorate. Okay, now that splits it to 250. And these numbers are obviously very arbitrary. So now I'm one of 250. Okay, still 250 people to apply to that one professor job that opens up once a year. You know, that's still very competitive. And these are, again, highly skilled people. If they have their doctorate degree, they've been around the block. You know, they have experience. So from that 250 pile, what else? I'm married to an audio video engineer. Now you're thinking, well, how does that really help you with your job application or being noticed? Well, half my clients come to me for tech support. So there's that. So let's split that now. I'm a married, you know, doctorate flutist. So now say that takes it down to 100. Okay. Right. What else? Okay. Instantly, I play the piccolo. All right, let's scoot it down to 1 out of 50. Okay, what other things? I have a podcast. Okay, how many podcasting flutists are out there? 5. So now I'm one of 5. But of the 5 flute podcasters, there's only one other who has her doctorate. Now I'm one of 2. And Katie and I still have unique paths in of itself, which would then make me one of 1. Do you see how I got there? So I, you know, that only took 30, 60 seconds. So I encourage everyone to do that for them. Like, what makes you stand out where you are one of 1, where people, you know, on the search committee or a client who's curious in working with you, what would make them go, you know, I want Jane, I want Joe. And so hopefully somebody finds that helpful.
I'm like getting chills right now because I was thinking last night about content creation in general. And a lot of people will not put content out because they think, what do I have to say? Like, what do I have to add to the world? What do I have to share? Why does my story matter? Who would watch me on TikTok? Who would want to see my Instagram reels? And the reality, as Heidi just said, is there are things that make you very unique. Even if you feel like you're on this very traditional path, there are a lot of things that make you versus everybody else in the field. And people want to see that. Like, I would love to see other music business coaches on TikTok. I'd love to see other musicians on social media posting more often, giving that kind of behind the scenes footage of what's happening in their lives, because it helps all of us to know. And honestly, what I got out of that final point too, Heidi, is there's really no competition here. Like, there's someone else in your space who seems very similar, but you're serving a different audience and you're helping people in different ways. Truly in the music industry, and this is probably going to sound so counter to what so many people believe, obviously, but there really isn't competition. It's all about a mutual fit. That orchestral job, you didn't get it because someone was better than you. You didn't get it because someone was just a better mutual fit for that position. And you're going to find your mutual fit. You're going to find it. It's there. You just have to come across it. It has to be the right timing, the right orchestra, you know, the right sound, the right performance for you, all that stuff. But that mutual fit piece of a career is so important. No one's taking your opportunities. They just aren't your opportunities. It's just not the right fit for you. And so as we're talking about the networking, like go meet the other flute players, go meet the other clarinet players, meet the people in your area who are potentially your quote unquote competition, and work together. This is not like a battle. There are plenty of students out there, truly. There's plenty of opportunities, there's plenty of jobs. Everyone definitely has a spot here, but you have to find your spot. And
exactly.
I mean, Heidi has done this beautifully, truly.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. In all of this journey over the last 2 years, especially in running an online business, what are some of the things that you've enjoyed, some of the highlights that have just really stuck out to you as some favorite parts of your career or this journey in building out your podcast and building out your client base?
Oh my goodness. Another fantastic question. There's two answers. One, not to be cheesy, but I get to work with Eric, who is my spouse, who's my husband of 15 years, who's my best friend. And it's like, I get to work with my husband. Like, it is so cool because I get to see these different sides of him. Like when we go into his office to work on a client's video and the graphics or the sound, and I help him with like the flute score, perhaps, listening to a flutist and getting it in line with the track, whatever it is, I get to see him in his element and how he approaches music and how, because as from an audio videographer, he's seeing and hearing things that I don't see and hear. And then that makes me a better flutist. That makes me a better teacher. So iron sharpens iron, and he definitely sharpens my iron constantly, daily. And I will say, like, when we go into those business meetings or business projects, we're like, all right, we are co-owners of JK Media Productions. I am not your wife right now. We are in work mode, and we come out, we're like, hi there, hon. How are you? But to work with him and work alongside him, I absolutely love it. It's such a blessing. And my second answer would then kind of piggyback off of that first answer, and it's people. Like the clients I get to work with, my business coaches, my co-business owners, like a great dear friend and mentor of mine who is the host and founder of the Ultimate Music Business Summit, Dr. Garrett Hope, and we just formed an LLC. And again, iron sharpens iron. And he has made me such a better person. He's made me think differently. He's challenged me in ways that I necessarily didn't want to be challenged. And he's just helped me grow. And for that friend, and I found him and everyone, again, not to be like podcasting is queen, but literally everyone in my orbit whom I love and I adore and I learn from and I get to help them grow was because of my Flute360 podcast. And I can't emphasize that enough. Like, if podcasting isn't for you, that's fine. Start a blog and then invite guest bloggers to come in, because then now you're networking, that relationship opens. If YouTube is more your thing or TikTok is more your thing, do it. But be pulling people in, because your life is going to be that much more blessed. You're going to find riches, just an abundance. And Kelly and I want that for you. We want that for you. And that's why we're talking about these things. So the favorite thing about being a musicpreneur is the people. That's awesome. And working with musicians we all went to school for music. We were around musicians all the time. We love it. That's why we do what we do is, half of it's the instrument. The other half is that you've always found your tribe, as Heidi says, in that community, and your people have always been there. And so leaning into that, I think, is really impactful and helpful and really fulfilling, honestly, long-term too. Now, we have kind of, I think, glossed over some of this. So we have Flute360. That's a main part of what you're working on, the projects right now. But you have a lot of other projects. Heidi is a serial musicpreneur. She has a lot of really cool projects going on. So what are some of the other things, if people aren't as familiar right now with your career, what are some of the other things that you are currently working on? So hinting at it, Dr. Garrett Hope and I have a second podcast. His main podcast is The Portfolio Composer, and he's been going for 230 episodes through that venture. And we started our second podcast called The Pivoting Musician. And it really helps musicians to pivot from that traditional path to being a musicpreneur. So that's a project that I'm really proud of there. And we have classes there. And then we have an annual summit called the Ultimate Music Business Summit, where we invite beautiful guests like yourself, Kelly, to talk about their field of expertise, studio building, how to get gigs, advertising, marketing, things like that, really to bring value to the community. Because again, these topics like marketing and studio building aren't necessarily taught in school. So where are these postgraduate students going to get that information? Hopefully through these remote classes that Kelly is building and summits like UMBS. So I have that, Flute360, the pivoting musician, and those are like the three main things, and they kind of all marry into each other. And I know that this is a question that you were going to ask me later, so I'm jumping the gun a little bit about like the obstacles of being a musicpreneur. And since we're talking about being multi-passionate here with different like arms to the business, one of the hurdles that I'm going through right now being a musicpreneur is clearly defining who my audience is per the sector, because there's a lot of bleed over right now, and a lot of like, which is great, I love it. A lot of composers and other instrumentalists are finding me through Flute360, but I kind of I'm starting to pivot in my business where I'm having to clearly say, okay, Flute360, I am serving flutists to really amplify their voices, help them with flutey things, and be their flute mentor. Because what's happening is with the bleed over, like composers and instrumentalists can find me all day through Flute360. I am not going to complain, but they're looking more for like networking, career building. How do I become a musicpreneur? And then saying, okay, that's more the pivoting musician. So all of this is to say, I'm giving an example for all the listeners. If you decide to go down this non-traditional path, but I think it's going to be the majority sooner rather than later, being a musicpreneur, I think that's going to be the new norm, and we can talk about that later if we have time. But if you go and decide, I'm going to be a business owner, your business is going to pivot. It's going to grow with you, and nothing is etched in stone. And don't be afraid of that. So one of the hurdles I'm going through right now is actually later this afternoon, I'm going to be talking with a career coach, Jamie Seletsky, to help me restructure my business, because it's getting bigger than not what I can handle, but it's getting to this point where like these different sectors and arms are kind of bleeding over and it's getting a little hazy. And I have to like sit down, reevaluate like what's going where. So it's super clear of how I'm serving my tribe. So that way, because if I'm a little confused, people are going to be confused, right?
Yeah.
So I went down a whole different rabbit hole there, but just being very honest and vulnerable as a music business owner, like, things aren't written in permanent marker. They're not etched in stone. Things pivot and change constantly. And again, just to be aware of your surroundings and what's going on is so important as a business owner, because your dream client could change. Originally, Flute360, I thought I was serving the 20, 30-year-old. But actually, my average demographic are 40-year-olds to 60-year-olds.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's a 30-year age gap. Yeah. How you talk to a 20-year-old versus a 40-year-old is completely different. Completely different.
And the resources that you're looking at that point in your career too are totally different.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So anybody who's thinking about being a musicpreneur, start off with things that you know. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? What are you going to get paid for? But these things can shift, and be willing and flexible to see and to welcome those changes.
What's so cool about the time that we live in right now is that this is the truth for so many people, but careers are not a 45-year commitment anymore. It used to be that you got your job, you worked there until you retired, and you got a pension. That was it. And that was how, maybe some of our parents, but most of our grandparents might have operated. And it's a very, very different world that we live in now. At this point, careers change all the time. We actually met someone this week that coaches people that are trying to find a new career, not in music at all, but this is more like if you want to try tech, if you want to try working for an accounting company, then they get you a 5-day internship in a company to just try that job to see if you like it before you get the education and that whole thing, which is wild. Like, you can't even imagine that ever existing 20, 30 years ago. So the world is changing, and with it, we have to adjust. But as a musicpreneur goes, if you file a Schedule C when you file your taxes in the US, which is most musicians, if you're performing independently, teaching at all, any of the independent work that you're doing that has to go as a 1099 income onto a Schedule C, you're an entrepreneur. Welcome. Yep. Congratulations. You're here. Like, you have a business, whether you've been treating it that way or not, you are a business. Even if you're a sole proprietor, you don't have the LLC, totally fine. This is our new definition of like that musicpreneur, that most musicians coming out of an undergraduate, master's, or a doctoral program at this point, if they're not going to take a big full-time job right away, they are on some level, even if it's a side hustle, an entrepreneur. And musicians have to educate ourselves appropriately to step up to that challenge. And that's not always taught in conservatory, but we have to educate ourselves. And that's why things like Flute360 are so important. That's why we're starting this podcast, is this goal of providing the education to fill in those gaps that we're all missing right now. So when you talk about your clients, who are your clients? What are you helping them achieve? I know that you've also got a little bit of an array here too, but what are you helping them fill in as far as those gaps?
Yeah, so one big gap that I'm helping people fill is to basically build their own path, their own journey. Because again, very piggybacking off of my own journey, that traditional path didn't pave out, right? And I had to navigate that really on my own. I mean, I had semi-advice from Eric, but there weren't really resources that I knew that I could, and there were, but I didn't know to look for them. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so absolutely, I did that pivot during that season alone, and that's not fun either. And so now I'm realizing, again, I'm kind of opening up the blinders and realizing, like, there's the Kellys out there, the Catherine Eminets, the Jamie Seletsky's, like, there are resources, but they weren't as apparent to me because, again, I didn't know to look for them. Again, we're not trained this in school, right? And so going through that pivot, those 2 years, and building, and pivoting Flute360 into being that marketing arm, I really realized, like, oh, if I would have had some kind of coach or somebody guiding me through that journey, how much easier would that have been for me? And so one thing that I'm really trying to do for my people is to be that resource for them, that they don't have to do it alone, that there are resources that, like what you said, Kelly, earlier, and I loved it, is, a lot of musicians don't realize that they are a business. If you're filing a Schedule C, you are. And the reason why I'm saying this again is because knowing that you are a business and how you approach your students and clients and sitting in that seat of saying, I am a business owner, is much different than being like, oh, this is a side hustle. Oh, this is a hobby.
I teach lessons for fun.
I just teach lessons for fun. Like, your approach is completely different. It's so different. And I know because I literally I was in those shoes. I approached Flute360 for the longest time as a hobby. Well, you're going to get hobby results. And that's where a lot of musicians, because if you don't own, like you said, step into that challenge. It's your studio is asking you to see yourself as a business. The government sees you as a business. So approach it that way, because then it's now not just a fun little cute side thing. You're going to take it more seriously. What are the tax write-offs that, you can do with your CPA? How are you going? You're going to approach recruitment completely different. I promise you. And so the one thing during my pivot journey that I know it's going to make me sound really doinky, but I don't care, I'm a slow learner, is that I was wanting Flute360 to give me that ROI. I was wanting a return on my investment, because I knew the amount of time, energy, and talent that I was throwing into each of these episodes, and I wasn't seeing the return that I wanted, but I didn't know how to get a different result. So I was treating it like a hobby, and I was planting corn, and I was getting corn results, right? And then for a while, it was a resume builder. Oh, that search committee is going to get really excited because I'm doing creative activity and publication work and beefing up my CV. Guess what? It gave me that result. I was offered a full-time job outside of Shanghai, China, in Tongzhong. I got academic. I got, those results.
Which is so cool, by the way. That's amazing. I love that.
Which is so cool. Then the pandemic took that away, but I don't have a chip on my shoulder at all. Yeah. But no, it panned out and beautifully the way it was supposed to. So then when I came back to the podcast, I still was approaching it from like this extension of a dissertation.
Yeah.
But I was wanting business results. And the big aha moment that I had was, if you plant corn, you're not going to get wheat. If you want wheat, you have to plant wheat. And that meant shifting, even if it was just a little shift, instead of seeing it as fun, cute, a side thing, I was going to take it more seriously. Then you start hiring business coaches to help you set up funnels, to help you build your newsletter list, to help you set up your product suite, to help you hone the craft of marketing. That's completely different than saying, it's this cute little side hustle. So I know that's another soapbox that you got me on. But when you said, and you really lovingly encourage people, like, if you are doing XYZ, see yourself as a business. And I can't stress that enough, because you have to give that to yourself, and you owe it to yourself to see yourself in that light, because then you're going to get different results.
Absolutely. And treating it like a business doesn't suck the fun out of it, by the way. Like,
no,
I know you still have fun hosting your podcast.
I do.
And I know I still have fun running my studio and treating it more like a business with that structure. But when you put policies in place, when you have plans and marketing, and when you have structure, and when you've got organization, and when you've got documentation around your income and expenses for taxes, and you've got a team around you supporting that, treating it as a business allows it honestly to be more fun, because what it does in all of that organization and structures, I've always felt like it removes the stress. Like having that, as an example for, just as a teaching standpoint, I know you'll obviously agree with this, but having a strict policy in place does not mean that I'm the big bad mean music teacher. It just means that's the most strict version of myself. And now when something happens, or there's a disagreement, or I need to provide good customer service, I can say, well, the policy says, but just this one time, because I know you're new to the studio, or we've never had this happen before, I'll make this one-time exception, and then just know that in the future that this is what the policy says. You have that to point back to. When it comes to taxes, if you're not like scrambling at the end of the year to put together documentation because you've had that built out the entire time, it just reduces stress. And now this project that you're working on, that you started because you obviously love it so much, and that's why it was the side hustle or the fun thing on the side to begin with, really just gets to be the fun. And yes, it might change how you view it and treat it, but it makes it more enjoyable when you don't have all this other back end concern and stress and anxiety because it's disorganized and dysfunctional.
I love that. That's wonderful.
I'm sure that you've seen this in the last couple of years as you've shifted into treating the podcast more like a business. So out of curiosity, what does this look like? Treating it more like a business and less like a hobby? I know you're focusing more on the marketing and the structure, but what does that look like on a daily basis when you're actually running this business on the back end?
Yeah. So again, kind of going back to that element of ROI, if I'm going to put, like you're starting to learn, for one podcast episode, if my talk with that guest is going to be 1 hour to 2 hours long, right? And then by the time you do the audio edits, like I pay Eric. Like I want to make sure that he feels seen and heard and valued, and I'm not just taking advantage of him. And you have the expenses of your website and your audio hosting site. I use Libsyn. You have the expenses of equipment. It adds up. And then you're like, oh my gosh, like, and we just published episode 230 last week. So with 230 episodes, at some point, that's when I was banging my head against the wall and saying, I want to see that ROI. Because I know, and I can say this with confidence, and I'm not saying this from me bragging in any way, but I know I bring value to my community. There are flutists who never have worked with me one-on-one, but they will email me and say, I won a competition because of this material. I got into grad school because of this information. Oh my gosh, that's going to be over the moon. And when I know my value, then I can say, and I can come to answer your question, I can come to the podcast and I can kind of ask it without sounding weird. Okay, what are my different income streams? How am I going to monetize off of this? What are we going to do to bring the right people in so I can help them move the needle forward? whether it's lessons or coaching or my remote classes or corporate sponsorships. I have 7 different streams of income coming in and out of Flute360. And I know that. And I know how people are coming in. I know how I'm getting paid. And before it was just like throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing, what was going to stick. Now, kind of like what you said, because it's genius, the structure, the organization, the approach is completely different. And it makes it more fun because now I have expectations and I know my needs are going to be met. Because in the beginning, the first couple of years, it felt like I was working for a nonprofit organization, which is fine. It's fine. Yeah. I love serving. I worked for nonprofits through NFA and TFS for many, many, many years. And there are so many pros to working for a nonprofit. I wouldn't be the same person if I hadn't. But again, when you know how much time goes into that platform, you have to take care of yourself to some degree because you're going to get burnt out. It's not going to be enjoyable for you anymore. And you're going to want to throw in the towel. And I didn't want to do that because I knew of those testimonials that people were sharing with me. This is helping me. And I was learning a lot. I knew that flutists were, really moving the needle forward with their own playing and their careers. And it excited me. I love serving in that capacity. I wouldn't want it any other way. But you have to be not selfish, but you have to make sure that your needs are covered too. You can't just give. You have to be able to accept and receive and be okay with that because you will burn out.
Absolutely. And prioritizing as a musician, your financial needs can feel a little weird. Like we do what we do for the love of the music and because we love the art and that needs to be first. But after a while, serving the art first might not be lucrative. It might mean that you can't pay your bills. And it might mean that you're not in a lifestyle that makes you happy or feel fulfilled. And putting that need for security and your livelihood slightly ahead of the art and the music is not a bad thing. And I think it also helps us to, again, create that structure so that the art can just stand on its own again. If you've got that back end structure and you know that you're monetizing, you know that you've got the income stabilized, then you just get to enjoy teaching, playing, performing, whatever it is that you're working on. All those projects just kind of fall into place.
Oh, for sure.
Now, since you are juggling so much, you do have so much on your plate. What are some things that help you stay organized? What are some, this could be like a productivity tip or hack, or this could be tools and resources that really help. What helps you keep everything balanced?
Oh, for sure. A couple things. The first that I think of right off the top of my head is Calendly. Get some sort of scheduling link. Oh my goodness. Yes. Instead of the back and forth of, I'm available Fridays anytime between 10 and 1 Central Time. Oh my, and then the back and forth, it could go on for days.
Yeah.
You give them your scheduling link, you set it up, you integrate your PayPal, you integrate your Apple iCalendar, integrate any other widget you want to through the back end of Calendly. And then you set the different cards, the different scheduling, links for coaching, lessons, podcast interviews, and you send them the link. They pick a time, and then everyone shows up. So Calendly, I think I pay $144 for the year. And honestly, I say this out loud because of how much it saves my time. It saves a lot of headaches. I think I would pay easy double or triple that amount because of what a huge resource it is for me. So get Calendly today.
I am vigorously nodding along. Yes, please use Calendly. I agree.
I wish I would have known that earlier in the business, but you live and learn. So Calendly, another thing that I like to do to help me juggle all the things is I'm a very visual person. And so I will use I'm an Apple girl. The reminder app. So the reminder app I have color coded on the left-hand side, my different projects, people, income streams, you name it. And then through that card, I can put down things that are due, an idea that I may have, content for later, anything. And it really helps me to tackle that list every day. And I because, I have different arms of my businesses, I can't get to everything every day because I'm a human being. But what I'll do is I'll even just kind of check in. So I'll I'll pull something from like the pivoting musician list, the Flute360 list, the UMBS list, and find the top priority from each of those individual lists, and I'll put it on my to-do for the day. So if I can do those 3 big things every day, then it's a win for me. So to have some sort of organizational tool, and the reminder app may not work well for you, the listener, but find something, whether it's Trello, whether it's your iCalendar, whether it's an actual planner. For me, I'm a tech girl, so I don't do actual physical writing in a planner anymore because I end up like scribbling and it's an absolute mess and it's not good for me. But find some sort of organizational planner to help you just stay on track.
Absolutely. I do kind of in the virtual, but I do like to handwrite things. So I will show you, I've got a to-do list always. And these are literally on my laptop, like sticky notes. And I have a today list, exactly like you just said. It's like my general things that I'm going to get to eventually. And then I pull from that every day and write myself a new sticky note, which I know is not the most like paper efficient, but when it's right on your laptop and it's bright purple, you can't miss it. So that helps a lot. So yeah, it's helpful to have that organization. I appreciate you sharing that. These are great resources and tools.
Oh yeah.
I think to kind of wrap up the conversation today, if anyone's interested in the things that we've talked about that you're working on, where are some places online that people can find you and find what you're working on, that you're, putting out a lot of content or talking a lot about these things more frequently?
Yeah, for sure. So I've made it really easy. Everything is Heidi Kay Begay. So my website is HeidiKaybegay.com, and all of my handles are at Heidi Kay Begay through your typical social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, things like that. But then the 2 podcasts, if you want to check out, topics like we're talking about with today with Kelly, the pivoting musician, and Flute360, you can find through any podcast app out there. Spotify, Apple, Amazon tend to be people's favorites. And I am really approachable. I do not bite. I promise. Like if you want to pick my brain or start up a conversation or just say, hey, I'm from Canada, I would love and I would welcome that email, because if you can't tell already by the end of this discussion, I love people and I love having conversations with people. And I like to think I'm extremely approachable. So feel free to send me an email at HeidiKaybegay@gmail.com, and I will respond. And I look forward to hearing from you and getting to know you that much better.
I can definitely attest to Heidi's approachability. She's wonderful, a dream to work with. This has been a treat. Thank you. So much fun. And I think this has been a really valuable discussion for everyone too. So thanks for your openness today. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.